I call the June 25th, 2018 Board of Supervisors regular meeting to order. Jeff, would you lead us in the invocation, and Mr. Melton, would you do the invocation for us?
You do.
I mean the pledge and then the invocation.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear Lord, thank you for such a beautiful day in Powhatan County. Be with everyone, keep them safe in their travels. Be with us as we seek to do people's business. Amen.
Ms. Cabell sends her regrets. She's out of town and can't be here tonight. We're at item 4 on our agenda, and I'd like to propose that we move the VDOT hearing, which is on our agenda, item 11D, to make it item 12D, to make it 12A, such that the VDOT folks who are here, and some of them have a long trip, can leave early. That's in the form of a motion.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The second agenda change that I'd like to propose is to add an item 11B, the appointment of a comprehensive plan work group. A second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So be it. May I have a motion to formally approve the amended agenda?
So moved, Chairman.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So be it. I am about to open the public comment period. There are items in our proposed consent agenda. A consent agenda does not call for a public hearing, which residents may nonetheless wish to speak to. Specifically, item 7F, diversity, and 7G, Cool Lane, the last unpaved road in Powhatan County. There are those who may wish to speak to these issues even though we don't have a public hearing. Now would be the time for you to do so. Additionally, this board will consider later a resolution, item 11A, concerning the proposed Cumberland landfill. Resolutions also do not require public comment or public hearing. Nonetheless, if the board does not object, I will allow public comment at item 11A because of the widespread citizen interest and concern about this proposal. Therefore, I ask you to wait until we get to item 11A if you wish to speak about the landfill. Public comment periods are very important to us. We do care what people have to say. We do listen, and we often change our minds as a result of being enlightened by our citizens who sometimes know more about an issue than we do or have an aspect of it that we haven't thought about. There are a couple of rules we ask you to abide by. 3 minutes to speak, or 5 minutes if you're representing a group. We ask that you not politically campaign or advertise or promote a business or attack anyone on an ad hoc basis. Please stay focused on the issue at hand. Don't drift. And if you would, if somebody else has already made the comment, please don't repeat it unless you really feel strongly that you have to. And finally, we ask that you do all of these speaking with civility and respect for all parties concerned. I now open the public comment period. If you wish to address the board on any issue, come forward and speak, please. Give us your name and address and sign in so we get your name correct in the minutes.
Mr. Chairman, Board of Supervisors, our attorney of Powhatan, citizens of Powhatan. My name is Mary Ellen Freer. I live at 3744 Archies Way in Branchway Springs subdivision. The topic for discussion is Hatcher's Plantation Wedding Venue. As you recall, the Planning Commission denied the CUP recently. You also, as the Board of Supervisors of Powhatan, denied the CUP recently. Since then, 3 weddings have taken place that we know of. You all have received emails, photos, Instagram shots of 2 drunken ladies jumping into the lake during a reception. Conversations, emails, the latest one this past Saturday evening, have been held from me, several neighbors, and all locations of Branchway Forest, Branchway Estates, Branchway Farms, and Branchway Springs. Hatcher's Plantations continues to advertise by wedding venue websites that they are still doing business as they have been told not to. When does this stop? When does the respect start? Not only for you, but for us as citizens of Branchway. I've been told that they can do what they want with family and friends. I truly find it hard to believe that the 3 weddings all have been for free, that a permit for each wedding to serve alcohol has been granted without an event permit. I direct my question to you as I did in my email recently. What is going to be done about this? This issue should not even be a topic for discussion, but it is. Thank you for hearing me out this evening. We all look forward in Branchway to see what your action plan is going to be.
Thank you, Ms. Freer. Anyone else wish to address the board on any issue? Welcome, Mr. Silverbauer.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Latchney, good evening. Don Silberbauer, 1426 Donovan Mill Lane, Powhatan. First thing, I'm going to keep this brief, of course. I want to thank you for the stipend for working the polls. Got the check today. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And I'll do it next year as well, or with the next election in November. Number 2, the Planning Commission. Planning Commission has an amendment to the comp plan on the agenda for this evening, number 18-3-AZ. That is intended to address concerns regarding the form and appearance of commercial development in Powhatan County, especially along the Route 60 corridor. This will begin to create a character within the county that residents have been asking for a very long time, and has so far been absent in commercial development. Impressions are very, very important for both visitors and for residents alike, and we deserve more than just fast and cheap architecture. So I would urge you folks to please, pass this amendment, and let's get on with helping the county to have a character of its own. The last thing I'd like to speak about is I sent you all an email after the workshop, I believe it was on June 11th, requesting that a meeting be set up with Tischler Bice to hear more about their impact fees, which we might better know as PROFER software package. This program has worked favorably for Goochland and see no reason why it won't work for Powhatan. Based on the real-world benefits Goochland folks presented, we should be able to quantify infrastructure improvements and additions to new development, thereby better managing our real estate taxes. My questions are, do you plan on having a meeting with Tischler Bice, and if so, when? And if not, I think you do owe the residents a reason why. Because if I look at, if I took a $5,000 proffer, just a number I took out of my hat, it equates to $24 a month at 4% for 30 years. So on a $400,000 house, we're not talking about a whole lot. And what this does, I don't need to tell you, but it takes the burden off the rest of the county and puts it where it belongs on people that are adding to our schools, requiring new fire engines and police services and so on. So I urge you, please, to have that meeting, get Tischler Bice in, and let them explain what they've got. I didn't have anything written on this landfill, which I'll call a dump. To me, it isn't a landfill until somebody digs a very large hole, and then they got to fill it, and they fill it with garbage. So the landfill nomenclature really is incorrect. It is a dump. And it's going to be a horrible event for the county of Powhatan, as well as Cumberland. There was a meeting the other night in the Farmville district, and the people in the west part of the county, apparently in Cumberland, they think this is just fine. So I'm not sure where this is going to go. I don't think anybody really does. But anyway, we're fighting the fight. We're on the front lines. We have a bunch of people motivated, and we're going to be at the supervisors meeting on Thursday. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Barnwell, always welcome.
Steve Barham, 3492 Richards Run, District 3. I gave y'all some pictures there, but first I'd like to comment on what Ms. Freer had to say. I was here a month or two ago and brought up about a wedding being held there. And my understanding was a letter was going to be sent by the county attorney to the Llewellyns. I'd like to know as soon as possible if that was done and what was the results of that. Now, to the issues I just handed y'all, our sign ordinance in this county, and no offense, I don't want to hear we're going to have a workshop on it. We have plenty of workshops, and I'll discuss that in a minute. As you can see, there's pictures there. Signs been up weeks, months. There are signs been up for a couple years in this county. They're illegal. And the main reason I wore a brand new pretty orange shirt, because it seems like if you're big and wear an orange shirt, or if you're big and wear a black shirt, like my fellow business owner at Rams Station, our landlord gets notices that our signs are illegals, and ours come down. Now, either the people have these signs out, don't care about the county telling them not to have the signs up, or they haven't been notified. Now, maybe we need to get on one of these big yellow school buses, and all of us can ride around, and I'll be glad to pay for the fuel and show y'all where these signs are at. They're not hard to miss. And then we got 2 fireworks places coming in here. They got signs up everywhere, and guarantee you from Saturday to at least Wednesday or Thursday on into next week, there'll be signs on about half the trees in Powhatan County between them and the county line. But that's okay. So I ask you please to look at that. We don't need another workshop. In reference to that, I came to the last workshop I came to, and this is no offense to anybody. That was 3 hours of my life I'll never get back. I could have watched grass grow and have been just as useful as far as I'm concerned. No offense. We have workshops, and doesn't a whole lot get done. And I'm sorry. It may hurt feelings. If it does, I apologize. No, I don't. I don't apologize for that, because truth is truth. Other jurisdictions have the staff review, like that broadband thing we set through, and anybody wants to admit that, they don't want to admit that was painful. We need to talk. We need some help. The staff could have looked over that and told y'all in about a minute what was involved in all 3 of them. And I see this continuously. We don't need all these workshops. It ties up your time, ties up county money and expenses for lights, air conditioning, printing off stuff. The staff's got to be here. I know they don't want to be here for all these workshops. And worse than that, people like myself, the citizens, have to be here. And we're here really to make sure things are done the way they should be done. And I have a few more issues, but I'll come back to the next comment period. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Yelverton, good to have you here.
Thank you. I live in the Aston subdivision. My name's Diane Yelverton, and I'm here to urge the board to vote yes to have Cool Lane paved. Our main entrance is off Huguenot Trail, and our secondary entrance is off Cool Lane. In December, I walked around and with a petition to request people, if they were in agreement with me, to sign it to have Cool Lane paved. And I was able to get 103 signatures, and that doesn't count the people that have moved in since then, which I've spoken to. I sent a letter with the petition to Supervisor Tucker, and I appreciate everything he's done to get it to this point for a final vote tonight. We have a dry hydrant on the outside of our main entrance, and we also have a dry hydrant which is 1/10 of a mile from Cool Lane. If a fire was to happen in Aston, I believe that Goochland would be able to respond, and in that case, they'd be using Cool Lane. If there's a washout, that could inhibit the fire truck barreling down the road. And I don't know if you've ever driven on a gravel road, but if you brake quickly, you do have the potential to slide. And so if they were stuck in a ditch, that can make a big difference to us as far as a fire. With the runoff from gravel roads, as you know, it does impact streams and rivers in the area, a negative impact. Also, in the summer, VDOT can spray the gravel roads to keep the dust down with something called calcium chloride. And we have people that jog, people that walk. I've seen mothers and fathers with children in strollers, and that can cause respiratory problems as well as skin irritations. So in closing tonight, I hope you consider what I've said, and I appreciate your time, and I hope I can go back to my neighbors and let them know the board voted yes to pave Cool Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yelverson. Anyone else wish to address the board? Seeing no one coming forward, I close the first public comment period. We're at item 7 on the agenda for those of you who are following along. This is our consent agenda. Is there a motion from the board?
Motion to approve.
A second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Cool Lane is paved.
Need a roll call, Mr. Chairman.
Roll call. Hold on a minute. Clerk of the board?
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Nordby?
Aye.
Mr. Melton?
Aye.
Mr. Tucker?
Aye.
Oh, excuse me. I answer for you. Go ahead.
You got your paving. Moving on to item 8 in our agenda, appointments to the board. We have one appointment to the Richmond Area Transportation Planning Organizational Technical Advisory Committee. I'd like to nominate Andrew Pompey to replace Brett Chardin. That's a motion.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The second one is an appointment to, or reappointment to the Community Action Agency Advisory Board. I'd like to nominate or renominate Beverly Fund. That's a motion.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. If you'll notice too, at the bottom of page 2, you'll notice that there are a whole lot of other agencies and commissions that we're having openings come due within the next 60 days. I would ask each one member of the board to take a hard look and see if you have candidates that you want to appoint, us to appoint or reappoint, and come to the next meeting prepared accordingly. We're at item 9 on our agenda tonight, certificates of appreciation. Local Emergency Planning Committee update. Mr. Nellis, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I was asked by the county administrator to give you a brief presentation and an update on the activities of the Local Emergency Planning Committee, or LEPC. I'd like to start out, if it would be okay, with a little bit of historical background about what brought about the LEPC, or why we even have one. Because of a spill of deadly chemicals in a manufacturing pesticide operation in Bhopal, India, around 1984 that killed an estimate of 5,000 people and injured another 50,000 people. It was later found that in a DuPont facility in West Virginia, similar chemicals resided, and even after the company's efforts to try to improve their safety track record and their safety improvements, they still had an incident there in West Virginia. From that, it was determined that first responders in fire and EMS, as well as law enforcement and others, really had very little information about what kinds of chemicals were housed in facilities, factories, or different places around the country, as well as the community didn't even know what was in their backyard. So from that, Congress in 1986 passed a law called the Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know, or what we probably really know it as SARA Title III. And that law was reaffirmed by Congress later on as well. So it's still an active act. And from that act, it requires a piece at the local level for us to put together a local emergency planning committee. That act addressed emergency planning. It identifies a chemical inventory which EPA put together, what's called the list of lists. And that list sets thresholds for how much of a particular material that a factory or a business has to report. So it's the base threshold. If they have below that, they're not required to report. And Powhatan have found that most companies or places of business that have any kind of chemicals are reporting regardless of whether or not they meet that threshold or
Good.
not. It also requires notification by those companies or to tell local jurisdictions about their spills. It may not necessarily mean that there's a 911 call associated with that spill, but they have to call us and tell us, we've spilled something and we're cleaning it up. And that way we can make sure that the environment is protected as well. Now, what I'm not talking about is anything dealing with vehicles over the roadway. Those are regulated by the U.S. Department of Transportation. So this has nothing to do with chemicals in tractor trailers or any of the tank trucks that you see across the highway. We have no way of knowing what they have in them, how much they have in them, or when or where they're going. This only pertains to chemicals that are found in businesses or factories in the county. The Act also required that each jurisdiction put together an LEPC, Local Emergency Planning Committee, and our county has one. The LEPC collects information from companies within the county about the types of chemicals that they have in their inventory or the things that they work with. We hold a meeting once every 6 months, which is more than what's required by the SARA Title III. We hold our, you can see by the notes that our LEPC members are made up by fire, EMS, law enforcement. There's a couple general public representatives on there. We usually get a rep from Virginia Department of Environmental Quality that comes by. We're very fortunate to have a member of the actual EPA response team that lives in Goochland, and she comes by, so that's unique. And our hazmat officer from VDEM, who also lives in Williamsburg, drives all the way up here to attend our meeting as well. We usually at each meeting, it's very short, usually probably only lasts about an hour. We give the members an update on any kinds of incidents or actions or things that might have occurred that's chemical related since the last time we met. They're given an update on any kind of reporting information that companies give us, especially if there's changes in quantities or the types of materials that are going on. They review any plans or procedures if there are any updates that need to be looked at. And in my opinion, I think that the committee's activities are very commensurate with the types of hazards or threats that we have in the county as well. On the second page of my handout, you'll see that I provided you with some statistical data about the types of stuff. Since my arrival here in the county, I've been keeping track of just any kind of spill or incident. You can see most of all of them are motor vehicle related incidents having to deal with motor vehicle fuels and diesel fuel types of things, with the exception of the illegal dumping of the driveway sealer. Everything else is related to either fluids or diesel fuel spills or incidents in the county, and that is up to date as of latest. And then finally, the only active cleanup site that we actually have in the county is one at Al's Market, and that particular, not necessarily a spill, but it was a leaking underground storage tank, occurred in 1999. And you see them every once in a while. The company comes out there with their equipment, and they're drawing groundwater and doing cleaning of the soils on a regular basis. And in my last conversation with the Department of Environmental Quality, they had no idea how long it was going to be. Said it may never end. So that until they get levels that come out of the ground that meet their standards, there will always be a cleanup operation.
But the tank leakage is fixed.
So the tank was removed and fixed. It's now they're abating the ground and the groundwater, and that was instead of digging up the dirt, the owner of the company or owner of the property was allowed to do this steam water injection process, and even though it may go on, for a very, very long time. But that's the only cleanup operation that we have that might be considered, big, or it's not a Superfund site, but it is something that's being supervised by Virginia DEQ. Any questions?
Just one quick question.
Yes,
So
sir.
the responsibility for that would be transferred between ownerships, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
That
Because
site
they
will
have
never,
changed ownership.
that site will never go away no matter who lives there.
And do you find you have general compliance from our business community?
We do, and ones that maybe forgot to report, they get a friendly little phone call or a visit, and it's usually, oh gosh, I forgot. And and we get, good compliance from everyone. I never
Any
have
other questions?
I have on your handout, as well as the handout here for the public, the information about the facilities that are in the county that are reporting, and also as well as the inventory of the types of materials that we have. The red marks, I just wanted to mark that those are what's called extremely hazardous substances, and most of that is sulfuric acid that we find in our cell tower batteries and things like that, and the other types of materials are things we find in swimming pools. So it's all it's very low. It's not the exorbitant or the exotic types of deadly materials. And then what we've also, and the last thing that the committee has done is shared with Mr. Nolan and put in our brand new CAD all of this information, so our first responders, police and fire and EMS will know that those facilities have hazmat inside them before they even go in.
That's great. And do we have a certificate that we're gonna present something to you tonight?
I don't know,
Is there a certificate?
not that I'm aware of.
Oh, okay, fine.
I
Don't get it. Get a
I didn't
pat
get
on
the
the back.
memo, I'm sorry.
You just get a good pat on the back for the hard work. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'd be
Anything else,
happy to
members of the
answer.
board? Thank you very
Thank
much
you
for
for
what
your
you do
time.
for the community.
Appreciate
Very
it.
much. Moving on to item 10A, old business bonded projects update. Mr. Voorhees?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Reports are there. Highlights include significant progress on the water tower. We can see the ghost costume is removed, and so it looks a nice, pretty white color, and they'll keep proceeding. The date that we've heard that they may be finished is July 20th, which is just a few days after when we had hoped, but it looks like they're on track to perhaps get all that done before the school needs to have it integrated into the fire system. So I think we're happy that they were able to accelerate. If we were to not have it ready, we would have to institute fire watch while the building's occupied. But there wouldn't be students there. That would just be staff moving boxes and furniture and such. So looks like everything's on track to be ready for the new school year. So we're happy about that.
Now, remember, Mr. Norvik is used to high places, so if you need an extra painter, call on him.
Oh, very good. I'll mark that down. Then on the courthouse, we're looking at a September occupancy. A couple of minor delays there, a lot of weather this spring that delayed some things, but there were also some contractor and design-related issues that had to be worked through, and I think we've got them under control. Having third-party inspection has been very helpful to us on that, and so it looks like things are still on budget and progressing in a good way. Of course, we all recall the tours we've taken with the school projects, and I don't have anything new to report there. It looks like that continues to be wrap-up operations. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions on bonded projects? All right, move on to strategic scorecard.
Very good. And so this is the first meeting where we have the actual scorecard with numbers inserted. We'll publish this monthly. We'll also have a way to publish this on our website for folks to be linked to it. A couple of blanks in there. There's still tweaking, what it takes to get that measure published, but we decided to go ahead and post it up so you can see some of that information is now.
Mr. Voorhees, for the audience, would you explain briefly what the strategic scorecard
I'd be
is?
happy to do that. So the board met last fall and developed 4 major overarching priority areas. They were implement an economic development program, expand access to broadband, expand access to quality of life services such as fire and rescue, library, recreation, and diversity and housing choice. And so we developed performance measures around all of those to see if we were actually making progress. And So those several measures have been identified, and the staff has been working to gather the data to report back to the board on them. And they've made good progress on that. We have a couple of holes in the report that we're going to fill up before the next publication. And we also have a couple of measures we may tweak or change. For example, on broadband, we've got a great new map that shows parcels that have access to broadband and parcels that do not. So we'll probably replace the relevant data from the FCC with that and have a link to a map. I appreciate John Wood, our IT director, working with our GIS capability, Bass Bridgeforth working on that too. And so that's something we'd like to switch in there. Then we also have some mapping we need to do on housing location. We have affordability and type, but we think we can do a mapping exercise that will give you a visualization of where the different housing choices are in our community. And then we are pending the citizen satisfaction survey, which did get some information today that the data is ready for analysis, and we'll be getting a draft report July 20th. So that's going to be moving forward. And then some of the emergency response data will be forward-looking. We are thankful that the CAD, computer-aided dispatch implementation, took place very successfully last week. And all our public safety agencies are telling me so far, so good, happy with the new tools. Of course, there's a lot of learning folks have to do with new procedures. But I even, heard from a volunteer out in an agency who acknowledged that kind of this big bang all at one time, new stuff, new numbering, all that stuff might be the best way to do it. Just get it all over with and move forward. But they really like the mobile data they can get on their mobile phones. So pretty neat capabilities. No reason in my mind to go looking backwards on call data and do the analysis, but instead, since we just implemented this, we'll look forward with new data to report on that. So those are just a couple of tweaks on this, and I wanted to thank our public safety agencies for all the work there, particularly Tom Nolan and his team to get this deployed.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
this weekend I had the opportunity to look again at Goochland's comprehensive plan. And it's always good to get out of your own neighborhood and go look and see what other communities are doing so that you don't fall in the trap of developing these paradigms of how you look at things. One of the things I picked up on was in their comprehensive plan, they've actually got a section for how they're going to maintain their rural character, and they have strategies for how they're going to do that. And so when I was looking at this today, our overarching goal that we have in the comprehensive plan is to maintain our rural character. And we have priority areas, but we should never lose sight of the fact that we, the county, the citizens, want to maintain the rural character of Powhatan County. And I think we've given the impression to some citizens in the county that we've put that aside with these priorities. I can tell you I haven't, and I won't, because my overarching goal is just like what it says in our beginning of our comprehensive plan, that is to maintain our rural character. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
To that end, Mr. Voorhees, I'd like if everybody look at page 93. The preliminary paragraph at the top of the page, I think, can be used to get at what Mr. Williams is asking for. Everything it says is correct, but I like the term rural character inserted in there somehow. So can we take a look at that, have staff take a look at that and reintegrate the idea of maintaining rural character in there? So we're true to what we said when we came into office. Everybody agree?
I think, if I remember the retreat that day, we discussed maintaining the rural character very diligently all day long, and not losing sight of that, so I'm fine with that.
Mr. Norwood?
I apologize. During that retreat, we discussed maintaining rural character several times throughout that day, and making sure that was still a focus and not lose sight of that priority, so.
Thank
I'm
you.
fine.
Mr. Nordvig?
Thank you. I would welcome that addition. I would suggest we put it under vision instead of mission. I think it fits better there. So if you're talking about the top lead-in lines there, if we put rural character under vision and fit that in, that's my suggestion.
So be it, staff. Thank you very much.
Well, I could make another suggestion. I mean, I'm not going to wordsmith, but you could
Go ahead.
actually have goal, mission, and vision. You can have goal at the top, then you have your mission and vision statements that are already there. But again, I'm not going to wordsmith.
So turn
Yes.
staff loose.
Yeah, if it gets too clumsy, I mean, we'll see what staff comes up with. I'm sure they'll do a good job. But
May we see a revitalized piece of it next time?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I have another question about
Sure.
the form itself. And Ted, I guess this is probably for you. I just want to make sure I'm reading this right. Let's just take, you have current measure here, so let's take, for example, I'm looking at priority 3, expand access to quality of life services, fire rescue, library, recreation. Under, let's just go with 3.4, I'm just picking one. Parks and recreation participation and utilization rates. Current measures, 1,799 participants, 3,091 total hours of utilization, and then you've got other things in parentheses there. What are those numbers? So if I were the average citizen, what is that telling me?
Very good. So this is a workload kind of indicator or utilization indicator. We do have some details behind this in our, we have a workbook that kind of where this information rolls up from that explains the source data and all that. And what we can try to do when we make this public facing is to find a way for folks to click into it and find the source data so they can understand more. We are looking at a software product that inherently or organically allows that to occur. Whenever you have a report like this, it allows you to kind of click on the data and click through the source and find where it came from. We're not quite there yet with this spreadsheet, but we do have an explanation of those numbers kind of residing out there that we can try to find a way to
I'd like to
pull
follow
forward.
up on Larry's point. Larry brings forward a very good point, because I think as board members, what we want to know is, are our parks and recreational facilities being utilized by the percentage of people in the county that we would expect to be utilizing them? If they're not, if they are being underutilized, why? And if there's specific areas within recreation, for example, where they are being underutilized or overutilized, we need to know that as well.
And I think that kind of analysis comes from the setting the tone at the beginning of what it is we want to measure. To what end is what you're asking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other comments about
Well-
this issue?
The follow-up would be, so what does 1,799 participants mean to me?
Right.
Right.
You know.
Right. Is it good, mediocre, or is it pretty bad?
Yeah,
kind of thing?
exactly.
Is it a
And what
benchmark?
are you going to do about it?
Right.
All right.
And this very conversation is the kind of conversations that we anticipate using performance data will drive us to have. If folks look at some numbers and say, that seems fine, move on, well, that's fine too. But when you get to numbers where you say, that just doesn't seem right, and that forces us to think a little more deeply about things. So we appreciate you calling those out. We'll continue to try to develop this tool and these measures. And
You're up next.
One more thing.
Yes, sir.
It's great to be able to click on something and find the source information, but you kind of have to have broadband internet to do that. And a lot of people don't. So can you get some sort of user-friendly way where people can look at good old-fashioned paper and also understand what's going on? I think that would be of benefit. Thanks.
thank you.
Moving on to item, excuse me, Mr.
Couple-
Melton.
I had a question pertaining to park, because I just spent many a night along with Mr. Kofer and others that were sitting up at the park watching their grandchildren play baseball. And I saw fields that were packed nightly, all four fields constantly being used. And as the playoffs came, there were only, 2 fields being used and sometimes. So $17.99, would that be participants that were getting that data through the youth baseball program and the soccer program and the softball program and all of that? Or is that how we capture that data, or I'm just curious.
So great questions. We'll try to give you more detail on, because I think what may not be captured here is how many spectators were at the events, which is a level of participation. I'm not sure that we have a great way to capture that, but we have, I think related to that would be the, 3,000 hours of utilization out of how many hours? So if you had a way to kind of say that's of the daylight hours available at all our facility, that is a representative 80%, you might think, wow, that's pretty good. If it's a representative of 5%, you might think, well, why isn't anybody using the park? So we'll try to work on.
So we've begun to capturing the data, that's good, and then we'll analyze it. Thank you.
Let's not lose sight of what we're trying to get at here. The whole purpose of performance measurement is to figure out the very questions we're asking up here right now toward continuous improvement and a bigger ROI on the taxpayers' money. So we're doing this purposefully to improve our performance as a community in multiple arenas. Moving on to item 11, new business. The first item is Resolution R 2017-26, respectfully requesting the Cumberland County Board of Supervisors to not approve Green Ridge Landfill's request to rezone and a conditional use permit application for 1,200+ acres. I'm asking Mr. Williams to read this into the record, and then I'm going to ask the clerk to take a vote on our count on our vote, because the intent is, if it passes, that electronically tomorrow morning the County Board of Supervisors in Cumberland will receive the resolution, followed by a certified mail copy thereof. Mr. Williams, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a resolution respectfully requesting the Cumberland County Board of Supervisors to not approve Green Ridge Landfill's request to rezone and receive a conditional use permit application for 1,200+ acres. Whereas Cumberland County and Powhatan County share a long jurisdictional boundary, and whereas Cumberland County and Powhatan County have long been good neighbors and standing memoranda of understandings about fire, EMS, Sheriff's Office, witness advocacy, and other cooperation, and whereas both respect each other's sovereignty and unilateral right to make land use decisions within their respective jurisdictions, and whereas Cumberland County is considering a rezoning and conditional use permit request by Green Ridge to create a 1,200-acre landfill and recycling center more or less flush against the Powhatan County line on the north side of Route 60, and whereas the people and the Board of Supervisors are deeply concerned by the degradation of traffic safety, especially on Route 60, caused by 250 to 500 20-ton trucks, one every 2 minutes, traversing the entirety of Powhatan's Anderson Highway through intersections already host to serious accidents, namely State Mill Road, Jews Ferry Road, Dorset Road, Academy Road, Maidens Road, Ridge Road, Trenham Road, as well as the long 2-lane section of Route 60 with its numerous curb cuts, blind curves, and horizontal and vertical anomalies. And whereas Powhatan's vision statement and strategic objectives identify public safety as one of the 2 pillars of our community, now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors of the County of Powhatan does hereby most respectfully request that the Cumberland County Board of Supervisors deny the Green Ridge rezoning and conditional use permit application. I submit this in the form of a motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, can I make some
Second
suggestions?
first.
I'll second it.
Then the
No
comment.
problem. Okay. So, one of the things that
as I've been preparing myself for the comprehensive plan meetings and things, I reread the Route 60 corridor study from Maidens Road to Cumberland Line. And two references in here, I don't know if we want to put them in the document there or just make sure that they're on the record. And one of them has a 2035 Rural Transportation Plan. This plan is an element of the Rural Transportation Planning Program prepared in conjunction with RRPDC, covers the rural area of Powhatan, Goochland, Charles City, and New Kent counties. The plan includes two projects on Route 60 in the study area, intersection improvements and turn lanes at the intersections that we just mentioned, Ridge Road and 684 Bell Road, which we didn't mention. There is no specific funding attached to recommendations for rural long-range transportation plan. They possibly have to be considered as smart-scale projects, but my point is for 2035, would the 250 to 500 trucks accelerate the thought and the challenges with those two intersections? The second part of this report that flared out at me was called crash data. VDOT, Virginia Department of Transportation, compiles a potential for safety improvements called a PSI, which tracks and ranks facilities plus injury and property damage only for roads, intersections, and segments of VDOT Richmond District. Rankings are determined by measuring the difference between observed modified crashes expected and typical crashes predicted. Using injury PSI allows VDOT to identify improvements to reduce death and injuries with safety programs and the 2015 Virginia State Transportation Bill. The VDOT Richmond District includes most counties in central Virginia, stretching from Hanover in the north to the Virginia-North Carolina border in the south, large area. This compiled PSI list also ranks both the top 100 intersections and 100 segments. The map illustrates one segment with the study area in the top 100. Considering this segment is situated in a very rural portion of Virginia-Richmond District, this seems very significant. This segment is located on an approximately 3-mile stretch along Route 60 between Old Tavern Road and Ballsville Road. According to the PIS list, this section of Route 60 ranks the 78th worst road segment with 20 crashes and 15 fatalities and injuries. So here we have a report that shows whether it's dated or not, whether the data's changed. This was done in 2016. We're now going to dump that many more trucks on this 3-mile section that's been ranked in the top 100 dangerous intersections.
So, Mr. Melton, you're asking whether we should add it to the resolution, or may I suggest that, given that I'll be speaking to the Board of Supervisors in Cumberland Thursday night, I could include those comments and those statistics in my oral report. Would you be comfortable with that?
Yes, as long as I would be comfortable with it being on the record at their meeting.
Thank you for calling our attention to that. That's great. Other comments or questions before we have a public hearing?
Oh, I would definitely like to add one more whereas to this. I think we've neglected to bring up the health concerns, which is after traffic, probably equal to what I'm hearing from citizens. So I'd like to read a very short paragraph and then make a recommendation for one small line added to this resolution. This is from the EPA in one of their government studies, and it can be found on epa.gov. The conclusion of looking at multiple studies was this: the presence of large quantities of potentially hazardous chemicals in landfill sites close to residential populations has increasingly caused concern. Concerns have led to a substantial number of studies on the health effects associated with landfill sites. From this review, we can conclude that increases in risk of adverse health effects have been reported near individual landfill sites and in some multi-site studies. And then it basically ends with the findings may indicate real risks associated with residences near certain landfill sites. So here we have a study by the EPA whose job it is to look at environmental factors, and they're saying, yes, there's cause for concern, real health concern. Numerous studies have shown this. And I don't think we're reflecting that in that resolution. So if we could just add something to the effect of whereas increases in risk of adverse health effects have been reported near individual landfill sites, if we just add that. that would probably be good for me.
As long as you can insert EPA study.
Okay.
So you got a
According to
source.
an EPA report. How about that?
Any objection to adding this whereas?
I would reference, if it's a report, I would give the etiology of the report, documenting the report's existing, where it exists.
So, Mr. Nordvik, may I get you to work with Ted to add this whereas?
Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, I just have one comment. We received an email this morning from the county administrator where Goochland has expressed their concerns as well. So I want you to understand that this is not just an issue for Cumberland County. The reason that you heard us speak so much about transportation tonight is because this is a rezoning and a conditional use permit that will affect not just transportation in Cumberland County, but it will affect transportation in the region. Roads don't begin and end at the boundaries of jurisdictions. We all use them. So we would like people to understand, as Mr. Tucker said, we're not against economic development. We're not telling other jurisdictions what to do. That's the last thing we want to do. What we're doing is expressing a legitimate concern about public safety as it pertains to the impact of these large trucks on our transportation network in our region. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I now open the public hearing on this issue. Is there anyone here that wishes to address this issue? Please come forward. And you can sit in these open chairs up here.
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, it's a continuation public comment period, not a public hearing.
Public comment period. Mr. Youngblood, good to have you here. Ms. Woodfin, you can go ahead and sign in and then have a seat. Save a couple of minutes. Mr. Youngblood, good to have you here.
I've been to 3 meetings, including the public meeting, and the way in Cumberland County, and the way they produced it, and they put it out to the public on June 6th, and hid it, literally hid it from the public before that, is something that also ought to be addressed. And if we as a county could also notify Henrico with a letter, the city of Richmond with a letter, because there are people that I have talked to on the telephone in management positions that had not heard of it last week. They get their water, and Henrico County has spent on the reservoir up there over $100 million. A reservoir which will be downwater stream in Cumberland County. One thing I want to say, this doesn't affect us, but it affects our descendants and our state forever. You cannot pile trash 250 feet high on 500 acres. We don't even have 500 acres of public land in the county other than state forest or state maintained property, such as the prisons and game commission land. Folks, this stuff on 500 acres, 30 feet in the ground, 500 feet high, nobody is talking. This will pollute this county and all its water. We buy our water from Chesterfield in the eastern end of the county, and people have public water and public sewer. We don't have any of that in the western part of the county, and couldn't get it for 20 years if you started the project today. They would be drawing the water either from the Appomattox or the James, and that water will be polluted by this 500 acres. It's not if it'll be polluted, but when. And it will be polluted. You can't clean it up. Once it's there forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Youngblood. Ms. Woodfin, please.
Cecil? Mr. Youngblood, did you sign in, sir?
Yeah, I did.
Thank you.
My name is Rachel Woodfin. Address 4717 Powhatan Lakes Road, VA 23139. I am a rising junior at Powhatan High School. I would like to express my thoughts on the landfill that is proposed at the eastern part of Cumberland County. In addition to the environmental concerns I have about this proposed landfill, I have several safety concerns about our student body in Powhatan County. Every 120 seconds, a truck will be carrying trash down Route 60, either passing or within blocks of all 5 of our schools. Every single one of our 5,000 students travels that exact same road, including me and my 3 brothers, who attend the elementary, middle, and high schools. In addition, most of these students also travel the road to and from our many after-school activities. For these reasons, I would like to make known my concerns regarding the close proximity of this landfill to our county, and by extension, our schools.
Thank you very much, and thank you for getting involved. Anyone else wish to address the board on this issue? I'm closing this public hearing. Would the clerk of the court take a vote, please?
Can I ask a question real quick, Mr. Chairman?
Absolutely.
The change that I recommended about the health factors, does that need to be in this before we vote?
No.
Okay, well, I
As
sent,
long as we got an agreement.
That we just, the second would be as amended?
Yeah, well,
correct.
I mean, Mr. Nordvig offered an amendment, so you need to vote on Mr. Nordvig's amendment first to determine whether that's added into the resolution, and then after you vote on Mr. Nordvig's amendment, then you vote on the main resolution.
Thank you.
I have a motion on the floor. Is there a second to amend?
Second.
All those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
Will somebody make a motion to approve the amended resolution?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All those, clerk of the court, please.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Nordvig?
Aye.
Mr. Melton?
Aye.
Mr. Tucker?
Aye. And Ms. Cabell, although she's not here, is against it, although it doesn't, the vote doesn't count. We've talked, and she's against it too. Thank you very much, all of you who have been caring about this issue, particularly those who came to the various public hearings in the western part of the county and in Cumberland. Moving on to item 11B, the appointment of a comprehensive plan work group. This is my motion. We, the Planning Commission, staff, and the Board of Supervisors have worked on the update of the comprehensive planning for many months. The Planning Commission's work forwarded to us is excellent. The Board of Supervisors has agreed to much of it and still has a few differences of opinion on the final product appertaining to land use on Route 60. These differences of opinion have caused delays in adopting the final plan, and this delay causes uncertainty for property owners and business developers. This is not fair and certainly has a dampening effect on the business investment in our county. To cut this Gordian knot, I am tonight appointing a comprehensive plan work group, the charge of which is to, within 60 days, put before the Board of Supervisors a proposed comprehensive plan integrating, 1, the Board of Supervisors' vision and strategic objectives, 2, the Planning Commission's draft comprehensive plan, 3, the public's input at the Planning Commission's public hearings, 4, the Board of Supervisors' inputs during its several comprehensive planning workshops, and 5, the public input through the comprehensive plan public questionnaire. Further, the proposed comprehensive plan presented by the comprehensive plan work group should integrate land use, transportation, infrastructure, economic development, and housing aspects of comprehensive planning. Finally, the work group should answer in its proposal the hang fire issues of nodal development and RC zoning. In considering what to do with RC zoning, questions of what to replace it with should be addressed if the work group chooses to propose its elimination. and what the county should do in fairness to existing owners of RC zone land. I hereby appoint David Williams and Bill Melton of this board, Karen Carmack to represent the Planning Commission's year-long work, and Andrew Pompey of the planning staff. Mr. Williams, I ask that you accept the pro tem chairmanship to call the work group together for its organizing meeting. Mr. Latchney, I don't think this needs to be a motion, does it?
Yeah, I was just looking at our bylaws. Our bylaws do say that committees need to be established by the board, so we
Okay.
take a vote.
In that case, I make this in the form of a motion. A second, please.
I'll second it, Mr. Chairman.
Discussion?
Mr. Chairman, so I understand what you're charging the committee with. But that doesn't by no means mean that the committee can't reach out to fellow board members, fellow planning commission members, or anyone else to have open dialogue on trying to drive to the conclusion.
Absolutely correct.
Okay? And then one last question I have, with this committee, will there be a need for the meeting on the 27th?
That will be my next item of business.
Okay.
If we pass.
Okay.
So is this a vote, is this a recorded vote?
No.
All those in favor of, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, so be it. Is there noes, nays?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
could I receive a copy of your statement for the formation of the committee for the
Absolutely.
goals? Okay.
Before the meeting, don't leave without it.
Don't trust me, I won't.
Okay. Given the fact that we've made this appointment of the Comprehensive Planning Work Group, I hereby cancel the June 27th, this Wednesday, special meeting and move the VDOT MOU to our next Board of Supervisors meeting. I do that because most of Wednesday night's agenda deals with the comp plan, and this committee takes its place. Any objection to the cancellation?
None.
Mr. Chairman, I have one question of, I guess, Mr. Williams and Andrew. Since we had a meeting scheduled and we blocked it out, maybe it might be a bad idea for maybe if Ms. Carmack could be available for the four of us to get together for our first time and have some dialogue on how we want to accomplish the goals that we've been charged to do. What are your thoughts?
I'll call you. 'Cause I
already blocked my night out, so,
yeah,
you know,
we'll work it out.
okay.
Thank you, gentlemen. Let's get on with it. We're at item 12, public hearings, and if you remember, we moved item 12D. So 12D is a resolution approving the secondary system construction budget priority list for fiscal year 2019 and the secondary six-year road plan for fiscal years 2019-2020. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for being here, VDOT.
Good evening, board members and citizens. As you summarize, this is the secondary six-year road plan for fiscal years 2019 to 2024. So this is a list of some anticipated improvements to the secondary road system and a corresponding budget. And with the consent agenda addition of Cool Lane, that's reflected in here as well. So VDOT staff is on hand to answer any questions before or after our public hearing on this matter.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Kevin Reichert. I'm the resident engineer with the Chesterfield Residency for VDOT. As Brett mentioned, I am here this evening to present for your consideration the secondary six-year plan as well as the budget for fiscal year 2019. I'll run through real quick the highlights of the plan and the budget. The plan is based on anticipated allocations for the next 6 years. It includes unpaved road money, which varies between roughly $5,000 to $6,000 per year, as well as the tele-fee money, which is approximately, it's a little over $94,000 per year that is available to the county for secondary road improvements. The projects that are currently included in the plan are the Carter Gallier Boulevard construction project, which is obviously it's under construction now and is unscheduled for completion in August of this year. Huguenot Trail Route 711 widening project is under construction as well, and that is on schedule for completion in June of 2019. And then we do have the Huguenot Trail intersection improvement project at Route 711, which was included in the secondary six-year plan, but then it was fully funded through the Smart Scale on the previous round. So that project is currently in the design phase. We do anticipate a public hearing for that project probably later this fall, and then construction on that project is scheduled for 2022. And then we've already touched on Cool Lane this evening, so that project's in the plan and is fully funded, and we will be prepared to begin on that project likely within the month. So we'd already gotten started with some of our preliminary work for Cool Lane. And then the other items that are listed in the plan are basically cost centers as a placeholder for some of the money that is not currently allocated to a project.
Questions of Mr. Reichert?
Kevin, one of the projects that I had on the Smart Scale that we pulled off, and I've had talked about in the six-year secondary plan, was the Route 13-609 intersection. I had it on a wish list. Is that something we should be putting on this, even though there's no funding and there was some, still some analysis being done on the best way to do that after some citizen input?
No, sir, it shouldn't go on this plan unless we could fully fund and had a concrete idea of what the improvements would be. The study is moving forward, so we will complete that study, and then at that point, I can work with the board and county staff to figure out the best path forward for a potential project there. We have made sign improvements at that intersection.
I saw that.
Just recently.
Any other questions of Mr. Reichert on this issue? Then continue. Got anything else for us?
No, sir. At this point, if you don't have any more questions, we can open it up for public comment.
So be it. We're open for public comment. Anyone has the wish to address it? Anybody wish to address this issue? Road improvements for the immediate future? Good night.
Sir.
Thank you for being here.
Yes, sir.
I officially open and close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion that we approve the six-year secondary plan construction as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So be it.
No,
Roll call.
Roll call.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Nordby?
Aye.
Mr. Melton?
Aye.
Mr. Nordberg?
Aye. Before we move on to item 12A, 0218-16, ratchet back up to 10C, Resolution R 2018-24, authorizing the county administrator to sign a draft consent order for Dutoy Creek wastewater treatment plant. Mr. Voorhees?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board members will recall they've been updated on this at a couple of different work sessions. This was a notice of violation for some exceedances on our daily monitoring report from 2015, I think it was, and this has been languishing in enforcement at DEQ for some time. Ramona Carter, our Public Works Director, has initiated some process improvements, and we have had no recent violations on this issue, but DEQ has a process to get this wrapped up, and this is how to put this whole issue to bed. She's also negotiated the fines significantly lower than they were originally proposed, and so this is the formal process where we'll enter into a draft consent order that opens a public input process if anybody has any concerns, and then as soon as that completes, then we'll be able to close this right away, so there's no lengthy compliance piece attached to this. It's more of a paperwork exercise. If you have questions, Ms. Carter's here to answer them as well.
Questions
Just
of
a
Ramona
statement.
or Ted? I'm sorry, David.
Just a statement, Mr. Chairman. If I'm not correct, when we discussed this last time, the problem's been fixed, has it not, Ramona?
Yes, to answer your question, the issues that we had were TKN, nitrogen issues, and we just recently made some modifications that will help that. And we also completed a magnesium hydroxide feed system, which will automatically feed into the system, so we won't be trying to track our metals and adjust. It'll all be automatic. So.
So again, it's
Yes.
fixed.
Yes.
And this is just an administrative follow-through for something that was addressed back some time ago. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Melton, question?
No, just a
Mr.
comment
Nordick?
that,
Good.
just a comment that, what was frustrating to me was that the notification and the communication from their office to us was very lacking. I know we learned something from that, and, we'll make sure going forward, we handle it more in an aggressive manner that possibly could have helped us a little, but good job negotiating and down the fine. So,
Yeah, I just wanted to make the point because most people could assume that we're doing this draft consent order as an agreement to fix something that we're going to, that's a problem going forward, when actually it's a problem that's been resolved. Am I correct, Ramona?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you,
Any
Bill.
final questions? Moving back to item 12, 12A, 0218-16, renewal of a CUP for the veterinary clinic.
Mr. Chairman, did we take
It was
a
a
vote on that?
resolution, yeah, I'm sorry.
that's what we do need to make a vote
Need to
for
make
that, to
a-
get to authorize him to
Authorized to
sign
sign it, yeah.
Is there a motion to authorize?
Please.
Second?
Second.
Record.
Mr. Williams.
Aye.
Mr. Norby.
Aye.
Mr. Melton.
Aye.
Mr. Tucker.
Aye. Brett?
Thank you, Mr.
Or
Chairman.
bump Andrew, whichever one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Case number 18-02-CUP is a request by Michael and Joy Blair to renew a conditional use permit to continue operating a vet clinic at 2861 Huguenot Springs Road, which is tax map 32-4-8 in northeastern Powhatan County. A CUP to permit the operation of the veterinary clinic was approved in August 4th, 2014. One of the conditions associated with that original case was that the CUP would expire after 4 years, which would be August of this year. Due to that condition associated with expiration, the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors has to review this request again to renew the CUP permanently. A site plan for the veterinary clinic was approved in 2015, and the business has been operating at that location since 2015. The Planning Commission recommended approval of this request, subject to 11 conditions listed in the staff report.
Questions of staff? I've got three, the same ones I always ask. Are we aware of any safety issues?
We're not aware of any safety issues associated with this particular request, and I'm not aware of any zoning violations that are outstanding.
No NOVs?
No, sir.
Any other questions of staff? Larry?
Andrew, why was this given a sunset clause originally? Because I was not on the board at that time.
From what I understand, there was a lot of neighborhood opposition at the time and concern about this more business-oriented use in an agriculturally zoned area.
And
But-
the safety issue on 7-Eleven.
That's correct. But we have not had any citizen concerns in the current review process. We've actually received some letters of support from neighbors. So that's why I think the original condition had that sunset clause. And since we haven't had any demonstrated concerns, the Planning Commission recommended approval.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions of staff?
Just a quick question. The renewal is for what period of time?
It would be permanent.
Permanent, so that we're not coming back. on
It would
this.
never come back again.
That was good. Good.
I open the public hearing on this item. If you wish to speak to it, pro or con, please come forward. Not seeing anyone come forward, I close the public hearing. Pleasure of the board, Mr. Williams.
Motion to approve with the proposed resolution by staff.
Second.
Poll, please.
Mr. Williams.
Aye.
Mr. Norby.
Aye.
Mr. Melton.
Aye.
Mr. Tucker.
Aye. Moving on to item 12B, 0218-17, the mother-in-law cottage.
Case number 18-03-CUP is a request by Calvin and Kristen Stone to permit an accessory dwelling unit detached within the A10 zoning district that exceeds 50% of the size of the main house. The property is located on tax map 46-47, which is 905 Clayton Road in southwestern Powhatan County. Within the A10 zoning district, property owners may build an accessory dwelling unit for a family member that is up to 50% of the size of the main dwelling by right. This applicant, their main house is 1,600 square feet, and they're looking to build a 1,000 square foot accessory dwelling unit for one of their parents. Since it exceeds that 50% threshold, they must obtain a CUP before receiving a building permit. The Planning Commission reviewed this case and recommended approval, subject to 10 conditions listed in the staff report, which address the size and design of the accessory dwelling unit, as well as access to the site.
Any questions of staff?
I do.
Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is one of the items listed, is this going to have a separate address? It talks about address numbers and the height, visibility for safety purposes.
Yeah, we generally give accessory dwelling units a separate address.
Okay.
Condition 10.
And then what happens to this dwelling when it's no longer being used by the family to be inhabited?
So our current use standards require that the dwelling unit that's used as an accessory dwelling unit be occupied by family members. So if the family members moved out, they could not rent it out per current standards to a non-family member. I know it's the intent of the applicants to have their family members live there for the rest of their lives. But again, if they moved out, the unit was vacant, based on current standards, it could only be occupied by a family member. Otherwise, it'd be a violation of the zoning ordinance.
Okay, Andrew, food for thought, and this is for my colleagues and Ted as well. We come back to discussions about affordable housing, and there are many creative ways to get affordable, quote-unquote, affordable housing in Powhatan. We've had a suggestion by Mr. Kunka from the school board for about 2 years now about having efficiency apartments built above a garage, for example, attached to a home. And then this also was one of the things I believe he and I discussed. I know it's come up, where there's a dwelling with good intentions, perhaps an elderly relative lives in the dwelling, and they're in the sunset time of their life, whether they have a medical condition or whatnot, and then they perhaps move to an assisted living home or something, or they pass, and now we've got this empty living space that is probably quite affordable, and it's just sitting there. So I would like to suggest that we remember this as we go through our discussion about the comp plan. There are creative ways where somebody from college may be able to come back home to Powhatan after they graduate, and they have an entry-level job. They might be able to afford to rent that place. So just throwing it out there for future food for thought.
And the Planning Commission, working through this case at its meeting in June, recognized that and had the similar idea, and they directed the staff to come back at the July meeting to have a workshop to work through our current regulations for accessory dwelling units and maybe consider lifting that ban on having family members only occupy that space. So the Planning Commission had similar thoughts, and I think they're to forward some ideas to you soon.
That's because we only appoint the best and brightest to the Planning Commission, so I know they're on the ball. Thanks. That's a free advertisement.
Just a point there. I spoke to Karen about this, and Karen and I had much dialogue. Also, one of the things that kind of bothers me, I've had couple of these in my district over the years, and in an A10 parcel, an agricultural parcel, why do we care whether it's over 50%? We're talking about 10-acre lots. Why do we, care whether it was 1,000 feet or 1,200 feet as accessory use? So when Karen and I talked about that, kind of one of the comments that she had was, why do we worry about it being over 50%? Now, in a residential zone neighborhood, they may preclude the ability to rent an apartment over top of a garage or any of those things. But in an A10 parcel, maybe it's something that should be looked at also, along with allowing, after the family members have ceased using the property, for it to be rented.
Mr. Norberg, thanks for bringing it up, because this has been something that's haunted us for years of what to do with the property after it's vacated.
Right.
I now open the public hearing on 0218-17. If you wish to address this issue, come forward, give us your name and address. No, not necessary. Thank you.
Stevie Barron, 3492 Richards Run. I think you should approve this condition. I think it's very good for a family member, that type of deal. But I do ask you to please look hard at opening up Pandora's box. You know, somebody moves, somebody, heaven forbid, dies, moves on, then they're renting this out. Where does it stop? I mean, I know what you're saying, affordable housing, I keep hearing that. That's a very catchy phrase in this county right now. I just ask you to please consider that very seriously, because people have good intentions, but a whole lot of good intentions ends up not being very good for surrounding neighbors and the situation as far as housing is concerned, as far as renting something like that out. That's the only thing I ask. I think you should definitely approve this for the people, but when you start opening up, what are we going to do down the road with that? Are we going to allow this to be rented or this and that? You open up Pandora's box. You got enough issues in this county to deal with. Please don't open that one up. Thank you.
Thanks for showing us the other side of the issue. Mr. Youngblood?
Cecil Youngblood, 2554 Ridge Road. On my driveway, going in my private road, going into my property, there was a double wide put up over 20 years ago on a family exemption. The double wide was put up and the septic field put in on less than an acre. The driveway was never put in. They still use the private road that I maintain. I buy the gravel and I take care of it. How far back and what can we do? This property has now been sold outright to a new family with 2 children going to public schools here in the county. The intended user no longer owns the property or lives there or even lives in the county. The original owner, Robert Lee, it was his daughter. They don't own, nobody owns the property that lived on it or as it was cut off for the original use. We need to look at how to enforce it. Once you vote to let somebody live in their garage or build that 1,000-foot house, there is no enforcement after that. We don't have anybody to go out and double check on that. We pay an independent guy that comes to my property every year or every 2 years to assess it. We need to look at how he might help us enforce these kind of things. Because it's right there. I'll show you anytime you want to see it. It's happened. And it happened next door to my property.
Thank you, Mr. Youngblood. Even the simplest issues aren't simple after you get into them. Anyone else wish to address this issue? We have a motion on the floor.
Mr. Chairman, this is my district. And I have consistently supported the conditional use permit to, as Mr. Barham says, to take care of an elderly family member or a disabled family member. So I am in support of the conditional use permit 1803 CUP.
A second?
Second.
Poll, please.
Discussion, please.
I'm sorry.
Discussion, please.
Discussion. I apologize.
Because
Yes.
I would like to make a point. It's almost like our 2 citizens there, Mr. Barham and Mr. Youngblood, kind of put an exclamation point on something I was thinking, and that is, this is a double-edged sword. We want to be efficient in occupying properties, and I agree with Mr. Barham. This should be approved. This is a conditional use permit and should be treated as such. It's conditional, and it's a permit we're issuing. And he brings up a good point about enforcement, because as one of my other hats that I wear is chairman of the Regional Rural Substance Abuse Awareness Coalition. Vacant buildings are a magnet for people to get into mischief. And as you brought up, Billy, this could be on 10 acres. What if it's on the back of 10 acres and it's an empty dwelling? we know for a fact, historically in Powhatan and Goochland, that causes trouble. People will use those places to congregate and do all kinds of substance abuse and other things they shouldn't do, so we got to watch this. So he brings up a great point about enforcement. So before we vote on this, is there something like a sunset clause, or is there some additional wording, or is there something we need to discuss about how this is, this permit is enforced to be only for this purpose, and then when that purpose has ended, how do we know that this no longer applies? So those are the kind of questions that are running through my head, and I'm glad those two citizens came up. So how do we enforce this? And maybe this is an Andrew question. Thanks.
So the first 4 conditions, which are standard conditions we apply to most of our CUPs, address some of the enforcement issues. The applicant has to consent to an annual administrative inspection, so we look at the different properties that have CUPs and see if we see any violations or conditions that maybe are not being adhered to. And then the second condition, we require the applicant to sign the conditions so they can't say later, I didn't know these were conditions associated with my property. And then the third condition talks about violations. If we, staff, or we receive a complaint from a citizen that there is a violation, we investigate it, there's evidence that there are some violations associated with the conditions of an approved CUP, we can come to the Board of Supervisors and have that CUP revoked. So there are some mechanisms that we have to attempt to enforce the conditions that are approved with any CUP, not just this one.
Okay, so follow-up question, Andrew. I think I still have the floor on this. Is that condition number 1, the annual inspection. It sounds like we've had a property, maybe more, I suspect, where it's standing vacant or misused or whatnot. Are we not catching those on annual inspections? I know you're fairly new to the position, so.
Mr. Chairman, I
this is
think
not a
Mr.
gotcha. Go ahead.
Youngblood's situation's entirely, this property is on,
Okay.
this house is on an existing, the same piece of property. What Mr. Youngblood has is a family cut, which is a 1-acre cut that was deeded to somebody else.
Okay.
This property's not deeded. So what we're talking about on Mr. Youngblood's situation is entirely different than what's being discussed right here.
Okay, well, I want to discuss this right here, and I still have the floor, I believe. So, Andrew, are these annual inspections, or maybe Brett, I don't know if this is maybe a question for you since you were in the position prior, are we catching these kind of possible violations with annual inspections? I guess that's my question.
I know in the past when we've done these inspections, we have caught some of the issues that might not be being addressed in accordance with the conditions, and we send them a letter. I'm not aware of any particular issues similar to this case or related to a similar case that I'm aware of. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Brett.
You know what I'm after. I'm just trying to make sure that things aren't slipping through the cracks, that we give a CUP, and then somewhere down the road, it's forgotten and the dwelling usage has changed. I just want to make sure that we know that. That's all I'm driving at here. So are you comfortable that that's happening?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. And again, when we're doing these
Okay.
inspections annually, a lot of times we are doing them from the road. If there's a particular issue that we have concerns about, whether it be a citizen complaint or something we observe, we follow up. I think we have the mechanism to follow up and make sure that the conditions are being adhered to.
Okay, thank you.
But Mr. Norwick, it's, the question that you're asking, it's a question we've avoided. We know we got a problem in enforcement, and we know we got a problem with the long-term use of such property after it's no longer used for what we approve it. So I'm gonna suggest, Andrew, you put it in what we call your tickler file. Not as a number 1 priority, because you got 19 number 1 priorities right now. But we do need to address this eventually and find out what the solution is to the issue.
Mr. Chairman, I disagree. I got a call recently from a citizen where the county had done an inspection, and they told them they needed to put their second set of numbers up, and they were upset that they had to post numbers. So we are doing it, and I don't see that, I haven't gotten a call in all the years, on the 12 years on the Planning Commission, 6 years or so, been doing this. I haven't gotten a call from a citizen, from a neighbor. We got a letter in this packet from the neighbors supporting this. Usually a neighbor will rat out a neighbor if the parents have passed and they're out there renting it to a bunch of teenagers who are trashing and having parties all night. So I haven't in all the years I've had a phone call from somebody who said the accessory use, so I don't know if there's an issue at all, but maybe the other board members feel there is.
Mr. Chairman, I seem to remember from the Planning Commission days, there was a requirement, if you were doing an accessory building for a family member under the conditions of the ordinance, that once that situation changed, there was a requirement to take out the kitchen, the stove, and stuff like that
You're
from the
correct.
building.
You're correct.
Okay.
To reduce its livability.
Exactly. So it wasn't going to be a second dwelling that somebody could be renting out. That was my understanding.
Right.
And that's still in enforcement today.
Well, it's still on the books. The
Still on the
question
books.
is it enforced?
So the question to staff is, once these buildings get constructed, once the family member passes and the property is no longer being, the dwelling is no longer being used for the family member, do we do annual inspections to make sure that people aren't using it as a second dwelling?
We've answered that one, but we've drifted afield from the issue on the table. We need to deal with it, but we're not going to deal with it over this particular case. And if you want to answer that question, go ahead.
Some CUPs in the past for second dwelling units have had a time limit condition. For example, it's only good for 5 years. They'd have to renew the CUP. We don't go into a house to see if the kitchen has had the stove or oven removed or anything like that. So to answer your question, no.
So Mr. Tucker's right. This is an issue for enforcement, but that's something we're not going to necessarily get resolved tonight. But I agree with Mr. Tucker, that's something we do need to go back and revisit.
Okay. Any other final comments? Motion on the floor, a second. Poll, please.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Nordvig?
Aye.
Mr. Melton?
Aye.
Mr. Tucker?
Aye. Moving on to item 0218-18, architectural standards.
All right,
Mr.
case number 18-03-AZ is a request to amend the zoning ordinance to modify architectural and development standards that apply to institutional, commercial, and mixed-use development countywide. Currently, institutional, commercial, and mixed-use development within village growth area districts must adhere to more detailed architectural and development standards than new development taking place within transition-based districts such as RC, C, and O. This proposed amendment would apply the same architectural and development standards to institutional, commercial, and mixed-use development occurring in all zoning districts. This amendment is intended to address concerns regarding the form and appearance of commercial development in Powhatan County, especially along the Route 60 corridor. If this amendment is approved, Section 83-475 will be repealed, with the policies currently within that section incorporated into Section 83-477. Most of the requirements proposed by this amendment are already included in either of those sections, but will be merged into one place, so they apply to all commercial and mixed-use development throughout the county. These standards address building color, building materials, building orientation and configuration, facade articulation, roof design, parking location, and the location of loading, service, and equipment areas. So again, most of these requirements proposed in the draft ordinance that was forwarded by the Planning Commission already reflect existing standards in one or two of those sections. There are a few additional requirements that are new that haven't applied anywhere in the county so far. One, features at corners and intersections. Buildings on corner lots shall include a permanent architectural feature of greater height than the rest of the roof, like a tower or something like that. Two, a development design pattern book. For all commercial and mixed-use development, a development design pattern book must be approved by the Planning Commission. This is intended to get at the style of the buildings and have the Planning Commission have a chance to review how the individual buildings may look within a development. And then finally, we added some additional clarification regarding building materials. At least 70% of building facades visible from existing or planned roadways must be constructed of wood, brick, stone, or other materials of similar quality and similar appearance. No more than 30% of building facades visible from existing or planned roadways may be covered with stucco or decorative block. The Planning Commission reviewed this request at its June meeting. They forwarded the case to the Board of Supervisors with a favorable recommendation. They did make a few revisions, which are highlighted in the staff report, and the draft ordinance is included within your packet.
What's the downside of doing this?
It does place greater standards on the development community, additional standards they must adhere to. I think that may or may not be a downside.
Egregious? Egregious?
In my professional opinion, there's one issue that I think could be a little more onerous than what similar localities have implemented. The development design pattern book, originally the Planning Commission had discussed requiring that pattern book for multi-building projects, shopping centers, that kind of thing, to make sure that all the buildings within a particular project have a cohesive design. They amended that provision and required every single commercial development to have a design pattern book. That may be a little more onerous than what other localities have. Other than that, I don't think there's anything that
Mr.
some
Chairman,
other Virginia localities haven't
Mr.
implemented.
Williams?
did you express that concern to the Planning Commission?
I did not express that concern, no.
So this wasn't discussed,
The Planning Commission members did discuss it at the case.
but you didn't interject, with your comments like you're sharing tonight.
I don't think I interjected, no.
Having talked to several of the Planning Commission members, the reason that they chose to make it applicable to individual buildings was because you would have situations where you'd have commercial development that might be next to a development or across the street from the development that had a certain design. And they wanted to make sure that, we didn't default to anything in terms of having a compatible architectural facade or look as we went up and down Route 60. So they were looking at instances where you would have several single dwelling commercial uses coming in, and if you didn't have something as a guide for them to go by, you could end up maybe defeating what you're trying to accomplish with, the zoning change that you're recommending tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. That was very well put.
So,
Go ahead, Bill. I'm through.
I was gonna call on Larry, because Larry, you have some strong feelings about this in your various presentations to us over the last year or so. Do you want to weigh in here, Dan? And Bill, I'll come back to you. I apologize.
I am incredibly happy that this county is officially looking at architectural matching and caring about what the finished product looks like and what this county looks like, both to the residents that call this home and also any potential businesses or potential future residents that drive through the area. I think this will go a long way toward giving them a very positive outlook on Powhatan County. Thank you, Andrew, Brett, your work prior. And thanks to the Planning Commission for opening what inevitably is a can of worms for somebody. But I think it's wonderful. And thanks for asking my opinion. I'm very pleased with the changes that the Planning Commission and Planning Department have made, and I look forward to voting yes on this.
Mr. Melton?
So, just a couple notes that I've made. So first of all, I like the thought process of cleaning it up and taking the transition zones and adding the same standards. However, one of the things that the developmental design pattern book, so we don't have one, and we're gonna design one, and then that's kind of what we want to see. Is that what that book will be?
So each individual development would come up with its own pattern book. One thing that the county would develop is the countywide development guidebook, and that would provide some examples of the types of development, the style of buildings that we would like to see.
And that, you said that later in the report, that's one of the things the county would do. How are they different? If the standards that we have here says that what you can have, 70% of the building, this, if the standards say those things, then why do you need two books?
The countywide book is kind of a menu or guide. It'll show examples of the types of buildings you would see. And then the pattern book that the developer would prepare and we approve by the planning commission would be specific to that development.
So it's just for that specific development, so you'd have to do one for a single standalone project and then a multi-project also?
That's correct.
And what you're saying is a standalone project could be an encumbrance to the cost of development?
Correct.
And the thought process on the 70% of the building facade and that 30% can't be, was that so that you eliminate split block?
That was intended to prevent one building from being entirely stucco or entirely split block, because those aren't materials traditionally used in Powhatan County. So you could still use the stucco or the split block, but it'd only be as an accent or in part of the building, not the entire structure.
Okay. All right. And I thought, so all of the standards that were in 83-475 really pretty much have been moved. Fences, type of fences you can put, that your air conditioning units all need to be screened, all that's been moved in 83-477. Is that correct?
That's
Pretty
correct.
much?
And there's a chart in the back of the packet that shows
Right.
what was in each section and how it
Okay.
relates to the current.
Let me flip through, there's a couple other things here. So one of the questions I had, and I briefly talked to you this evening about it, I'm okay with the change that said building orientation to the street or corner building being high to look like a tower. I'm okay with that. The 45,000 square feet building size, and what would, so we would allow a building that would be 45,000 square feet in what, up to 45,000, in what areas? And what areas would be allowed to be more than 45,000 square feet?
So this is a carryover from the current regulations. Only in the village center and village center plan development VCPD districts is there a cap on building size, and that's 45,000 square feet. So in all the other zoning districts, you would just adhere to the base district requirements. This is only VC and VCPD have specific
But
size
wasn't the
requirements.
goal to try to bring it all together so it cohesively flowed, so you knew it was allowed here and there? But- So we're gonna say no more than 45,000 square feet, because, you know, a typical supermarket today, from a Publix, or a Kroger, or a Harris Teeter's, or more than 45,000 square, then maybe you don't want those in the VCPD or the Village Center. And, you know, I'm not a big box retailer lover, but, you know, those may come to this county one day, and I just want to make sure that there's places that those type of things would be allowed, and maybe an opportunity, if there was, through architecture, a way to build one bigger than 45,000 square feet in a Village Center PD. Through architectural design, it could look like it's 25,000 square feet, a building and a building and a building, but it could be 60,000 square feet with different businesses inside of it. So I'm just concerned about the 40. We had much dialogue on this back when I was on the Planning Commission, and then subsequently to the board last time when we talked about limiting the square foot in certain areas.
We did. It was down at, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, it was down when we were discussing
7-Eleven.
Founder's Bridge
1511.
and 7-Eleven, and the issue was back then, U-Crops was on the table for potentially coming in. We had a cap of, what was it, 20,000 square feet at that time. Some folks thought, well, maybe you just want to have a fresh market. You don't want to have, you know, a large grocery store like we said at that time. We thought 60,000 was large back then. I think Billy makes a good point. I think you want to have some flexibility. Maybe what you can do is, in situations where you have somebody coming in, and probably, to be honest with you, if you had to think about where it probably could happen, it would be east of, right now, 288 in the 7-Eleven corridor, down in that section where you've got the Village Town Center zoning today. So what you could do is you could have the cap, and then you could have with a CUP a greater than 45 to address special situations.
I think that's the elegant solution, is to leave it the way it is, but have a CUP, which allows it to go larger based on a case-by-case basis of location, et cetera.
But from a business standpoint, if you were trying to build a center and you had a building that you could build and break it up into multiple offices or multiple businesses where people could walk and shop, and you're at 45 and you had to get a conditional use permit, I'm not sure how you go to the bank. It's always been perplexing to me how somebody goes to the bank and borrows money on a conditional use permit that could be pulled from you after you do it if somebody's not happy.
That doesn't happen. And Tom, I'll ask you to address that. How many conditional use permits have you seen pulled after the people have already been vested with, you know, significant investment of their own money in the operation of a business? I can't remember ever having one of that scale pulled.
Well, and I think part of the problem is the misnomer. I know it's called a conditional use permit, but it's legally a rezoning.
Yes.
And so the way it typically happens, if they violate a condition, it's a zoning enforcement, just like any other zoning violation. The remedy is not to pull the permit, because it's really a rezoning issue. The remedy is to enforce compliance with the conditions. It's basically conditional zoning, and so if they're not doing the conditions, then you go to court, asking the court to order them to comply with the conditions.
Yeah, Billy, I think that's the problem. I think we've been misconstruing it.
Okay.
The question on the table is at the heart of the reason that we haven't been able to bring this kind of thing to closure. We're talking about the future soul of the community. Are we going to go one way or the other? And we keep getting to the Y in the road and backing away from it. So we've got to deal with it sooner or later, or we're going to be back here again next year and the year after trying to find out what the compromise is. So what is the compromise? Are we going to vote on it the way it's been presented to us, or do we want some modification there too?
Mr. Tucker, by no means am I asking us not to vote on it tonight and make any major modifications. I'm fine. I had some questions on some of it, and I still think some form to give the ability to have a building made larger is the only change I'm looking for. So I'm not by any means trying to slow the process down or shoot it in the foot. I think it's good work. I think it makes sense to do what's been proposed for us.
So, Mr. Pompey, if you had to add one sentence to what you have proposed that gets at the issue that Mr. Melton is putting on the table, what would it say?
One possible solution that Mr. Chardine posted was, we want to maintain the rural character and the small town feel of our village center, so reducing the size of the buildings is a good thing. In village center plan development, to do a plan development, you have to have a master plan approved. So maybe it's not necessary to cap building size in a PD, because you'll see what is proposed, what we built, and what the building would look like in the field of the development.
Does that give us enough teeth to hold our development community's feet to the fire to make sure that we don't continue to do to 60 what we're doing to 60?
Mm-hmm.
This is the crux of the matter. We come to it, as I said, over and over again. Does that give enough teeth, Mr. Latchney? Does it give us enough teeth?
Well, it gives you all the teeth you need, because it's like Mr. Pompey was saying, each planned development comes to you for a global analysis of that development, and you'll have a full-blown discussion on the propriety of 60,000 square feet or whether that doesn't fit. So you'll have, and we have the same standard zoning, we'd have to be arbitrary and capricious. So it probably gives you all the teeth you need to do it that way.
So can we leave it at this? What you've presented to us, but Mr. Latchney and Mr. Pompey work out that one or two sentence addition to make sure that we can do what we need to do to move on.
Well, I don't think it's an addition, it'd just be a deletion of the 45,000 square foot cap in that district, right?
And
That's what
replaced
you
by
were-
what?
Well, I would just scratch in that section, it would just say, in village center, total building area shall not exceed 45,000 square feet, and get rid of the PD reference.
Mr. Melton, can you live with it?
So read it, you would say not to exceed 45,000?
In the village center district, total building area shall not exceed 45,000 square feet. That would allow, in all the other zoning districts, any size building, provided you meet the setbacks and the land coverage and all those other district requirements.
And they would still submit their plan, and you would then have the ability, and I guess they would submit their, what did you call it, the book that showed the...
Yeah, any PD has to have a master plan that outlines the requirements of the development.
Mr. Nordwick, can you live with it?
Let me just ask a blunt question, Andrew. So are we allowing large buildings in Powhatan County by doing this?
No.
Because I don't think our citizens want to just open the door to multiple. So explain to me, make my citizens who don't want to look like Chesterfield County and don't want huge projects and want this to be a rural community, or at least have a rural feel, make the people in District 2 feel comfortable that we're not suddenly going to be building 100,000 square foot facilities. So what does this change
This
do?
language only addresses development within our village center
Correct.
zoning district.
Right.
And the intent is to make sure that buildings are more pedestrian scale, small scale, like you would see in a traditional village.
Correct.
This doesn't address building size in any other zoning district.
Correct.
Okay. And we don't really know what's going to become of the comp plan, and we just formed a committee tonight. So all of this may have a kind of an alteration as we go down the road.
Yep.
I would think, because we don't really know where these village centers, I mean,
I
I
don't
think we
want to
do.
use that as a reason for holding up a vote on this
Oh,
tonight.
I'm not suggesting we hold it
I
a
agree
vote.
100%,
Yeah, I
Mr.
know
Williams.
you're not, but
I'm
what
just looking at this one sentence here
Yeah.
and making sure that we're not making a mistake.
I want to make sure now, Andrew answered, in my opinion, correctly. We're not doing this for all zoning districts. We're talking about the village town centers, and we're talking about, are we going to limit in the village town centers to the way the ordinance reads today to 45,000 square feet? And if we're not, are we going to allow it using some collar and some review process that we're going to be comfortable with? Is that get at it, Mr. Melton?
Yes, it does. Because how many times have I heard, get me another supermarket in the county, I'm tired of shopping at Walmart and Food Line. I'd like to have a Publix, I'd like to have a Kroger or whatever, and they're not gonna build a 45,000 square foot
If a
supermarket.
Publix came in down today, down on Route 711, east of 288, an area on the future land use map that's designated as a village town center, we would probably want to have that Publix come in, I would think. All right, meaning if they met the architectural standards, the standards that have been set in place. When people ask me, what do you want to see down there? I said, you've already got the template. It's what Mr. Sowers has already created. So the question is, how do we go forward tonight with approving what the Planning Commission has recommended to us, what staff has recommended to us, with an exception, but with a collar for the 45,000 square feet where we have certitude that we're just not willy-nilly turning people loose with this. What the concern was to get away from that village walking feel. I don't think we're going to do that. So what I would like to do is to have it with some type of conditional approval where we would have a chance to say, yeah, this does fit or it doesn't fit.
Andrew, can you try to capture now what, I'm getting the drift that we like to put this thing to rest tonight, as long as the issues have been put on the table are addressed. Do you have a sense, and Tom, I'll ask you too, of what we're asking for to modify this proposal such that we can pass it tonight? Or do we need to defer this to another meeting?
No.
No. I think, Mr. Chairman, if I may, and Tom, you help me out here and speak up, you too, Andrew, and Brett. I think the easiest, cleanest way is with a conditional use permit for anything exceeding 45,000.
Well, that was the original recommendation, just adopt this, and then you can come back and add some CUP language. I mean, you don't have to do that tonight, unless we're afraid we're going to get an application tomorrow. I don't think we are.
That's a
No.
good point, Tom.
No.
Good point.
So we could adopt this tonight and then come back with.
Why not do what Mr. Williams is suggesting, that you adopt it, you add that anything over 45,000 square feet, since you've said that the conditional use can't be just pulled, that it's basically a rezoning, I'm okay. That you say anything over 45,000 would have to come before and apply for a conditional use permit. I mean, it gives the option, for a developer to be able to come in and put a quality-sized building in that could look, you can design with architecture, you can make 100,000 square foot.
Well, we've
building.
already got in there about how you have to break up every
Break
so
up
many feet.
walls and the height of the
facade.
walls and all of those things.
And we're going to approve it. So again, with the additional things that we're putting in with the higher development standards, with asking or requiring people to come up with their own catalog and showing them our catalog of designs, I think we can shepherd the final product to an outcome that we can all feel good about.
So let's bring this to closure. Is there anything no one needs to be said to either our attorney or to our planning department? Then I'll entertain a motion to approve 0218-18
So moved, Mr. Chairman. I'll make the motion. to approve.
With the amending that.
with the amendments. A
And
second to this?
Which amendments? CUP requirements?
With an amendment for a CUP requirement for village town centers where buildings are greater than 45,000 square feet requires a conditional use permit approval by the Board of
So
Supervisors.
it's basically, condition P, is that correct?
That's correct.
Which takes us right back to the beginning. Is there a second to this motion?
Second.
I'll open the public hearing on this
I'm
particular.
sorry, Mr. Chairman, is that motion based in public necessity, convenience, general welfare, and good zoning practice?
Absolutely.
I couldn't have said it better.
Now I'll open the public hearing on this issue. If you wish to speak to 0218-18, please come forward, give us your name.
My name is Woody Kofa, Powhatan, Virginia. My leg's gotten stiff. While y'all consider this, I would like for y'all to reconsider the parking in front of the buildings. Right now, you got it set at 50% parking, like Walmart, Lowe's, Home Depot, or somebody come in. Only 50% of the parking be parked in front of the building. I'd like y'all to reconsider that sometime about doing away with it, because I don't think that's good. And number,
Is that it?
no, sir.
Oh,
Number two, back to that book y'all talking about. I sure would like to see that book before y'all voted on it, but you don't have to. But when are we gonna get to see this book? There'll be a guide that how to apply for this. And doesn't this mean that we have to fill out a form, do a lot of work, and then take it to the planning commission? And then they have to approve before we can do any site plan work on it. And another question I have, is there an appeal process to the planning commission on that book? Can we appeal it to the board or whatnot? That's just some questions I had about it.
spoken as a true developer.
Thank you, sir.
Anybody want to address these issues at this point? Mr. Pompey?
Keep the public hearing open.
You gotta close the public hearing.
Keep the public hearing open, then we answer that.
Sorry. Is there anybody else that wishes to address this issue? Mr. Pompey, would you come back up, please? The issues that Mr. Kofer have put on the table, how much violence do they do to the proposal we're getting ready to consider?
And maybe Mr. Latchney can provide some feedback. We do not have an appeals process set up for, in this current language, for applicants who disagree with the planning commission's.
Have we ever had an official appeal policy?
Well, some things have an appeal. I mean, there's in our code certain things that can be appealed, and we lay out the policy on how that appeal will work.
But aren't they final decisions by the board that can be appealed? Not, appealing planning commission unless the planning commission has domain over the issue separate from the board of supervisors?
Yeah, I don't have an immediate example that comes to mind, but I think we had there's like a couple of places where there's an appeal, and
Mr.
they
Chardon?
and Andrew may know where they're at.
Don't know, since the Board of Supervisors now has the jurisdiction over, I believe, subdivision exceptions, but when the Planning Commission used to be the body that approved those, I think there was language in there that decision could then be appealed to the board.
That may have been the one I
might
was
be the only
thinking about.
example
That
I
might
can
have been the
think
one I was
of.
thinking about.
My recommendation, on these types of things is go back and then come back to us next meeting with recommendations, how you want to address, if you want to address any concerns or issues that come up. You're not going to get them all resolved here tonight.
Yeah, this could go on all evening.
They'll go on all evening. So if you got concerns or issues that you know that have a simple fix, that are an obvious simple fix, go ahead and shout it out. We'll get it done tonight. If you don't, these are things that you can go back and work through with staff and then come back to us with what you feel are your best recommendations. But I don't want to elongate this process anymore tonight by going back and, trying to pick the bones on every issue. You're not going to get it resolved tonight.
Concur. The public hearing's still open?
You haven't closed it yet.
Anybody else wish to address this position, this issue? I close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir. Discussion?
I would like to kind of have some dialogue. Maybe I'll talk with Mr. Kofer and then maybe staff a little bit on the parking. I understand what he's trying to say is we won't allow 50% of the parking in the front of the building. You know, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I'm not sure. Would you be forcing a building to maybe move closer to the road and you'd put 50% of it in the front and 50% in the back? Or maybe it'd be better to push the building back and have all the parking in the front.
I agree with you, Mr. Melton. I don't
But
know, I
we'll
don't
never
know the
debate.
pros and cons,
Yep.
but I know I've got staff down there that
Yep,
can
and
answer
that's what I
those
just said. I
questions
would-
and come back with a recommendation as to what constitutes good planning in Powhatan County.
Yep, I agree. And so I'm just saying.
I know, because I had the same question you did.
So we're proposing tonight to pass this as is with the understanding that we can make refinements thereto later on, which would be normal anyway. We always changing things over time. Is that an adequate definition?
One of the questions of staff, please. Andrew, and I
Can
didn't see
can
it
I,
if I missed it.
point of information on that, just,
Go ahead.
I thought that the motion was to adopt it with the CUP for the 45,000.
It is.
Yes.
It is.
So I just wanted to make,
If you-
not, any additional changes would be to
That's
come
correct.
back.
At this point, that's correct.
Good
So right
point.
now, any discussion that proceeds is going into Pompey's list of things to bring back to us over time to refine what we pass tonight if we pass tonight. Bill, do you want to proceed?
Just one quick question, I promise. So, Andrew, in speaking with the chairman of the planning commission, that site plans will now be going before the planning commission for approval. Is that in this document, or is that coming to us later?
No, site plans will not be reviewed by the planning commission, only the architectural pattern book.
They won't get involved, because years ago, we used to do site plan review. I thought she indicated that they were gonna be doing site plan review.
No, it's going to be the architectural.
But we won't approve the site plan administratively until we get that pattern book approved.
I'm fine.
What's the will of the board?
Well, I'll make a motion, we approve the,
Well, we got a
ready to be
motion on the
made.
floor.
We've
I'm sorry,
already
we do
done
have
the
a motion on the
motion.
floor.
You went for the discussion.
Okay.
Mr.
Poll us.
Williams? Mr. Williams?
All right.
Mr. Norvig?
Aye.
Mr. Melton?
aye.
Mr. Tucker?
Aye. We're moving on to item 13 on their agenda. This is our second public comment period. If you wish to address the board on any issue at this point, please come forward, give us your name and address, and please abide by the regulations, rules that I gave out at the beginning for the first public hearing. Anyone wish to address the board on any issue, come forward, please. If there is anyone else who intends to speak, please start forward now so we can save some minutes.
Oh, yes, Steve Barham, 3492 Richards Run, District 3. I've heard a whole lot of discussion the last couple months about business, new business, new business. 30%. We get 10 to 15, we'll be lucky. We need to address and look at retaining the businesses you have. And maybe we're doing that. As a small business owner, we don't see it, to be honest with you. I heard discussion tonight about wastewater and everything. I've been involved with that with my landlord. We have to do testing. A year or so ago, Mr. Williams and I had a meeting with some of the staff discussing this. And it was brought forward or discussed about possibly trying to get one company to come in here and do the testing for everybody. And I haven't seen any movement on that. And it would save us some money. People don't realize it's $300 to $600, $700 every quarter to have your water tested. So, you know, that'd be a big help for small business.
Just so you know, Mr. Carter's been asked to look into that.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that. 'Cause I mean, that's something that, you know, I talked to a whole lot of small business owners, and they, you know, that's a big bite out of, you know, out of a small business. You know, when you talk about businesses and all the architecture, I think is very good. And I keep hearing talking about housing. every meeting I come to is diversified housing, affordable housing. Most of us are old enough to know where we were on September 11th, 2001. Some of y'all old enough to know where you were. President Kennedy got shot and you knew what you were doing. You'll always remember that. I was too young. I was alive, I was too young. 2/26/18. That was a very important meeting for Powhatan County. And if you can't remember where you were and what you were doing and what the people said, and they said it very loudly. Some of the board members said, see what happened when they get out of control. Well, people haven't forgotten what happened at that meeting. And they don't want to see a bunch of willy-nilly development. I'm glad we're setting up a committee. But please remember, the people said they don't want all these apartments up and down 60. So please remember what happened on the 26th. I don't want to see a repeat. I think it was good. The people spoke, they spoke their mind, and people, I think, persuaded y'all to do what should have been done. So please consider that, and thank you very much.
Anyone else wish to address the board? Mr. Strawder, good to have you here.
Herbert Strawder, 4629 Barrow Road, Powhatan, Virginia. I wasn't going to say anything, but two things. I heard something here tonight talking about, seems like substituting housing where a person has, an elderly person has moved out as, how should I say, affordable housing. I wouldn't want to wait until somebody died in order to somehow make that part of affordable housing. We do need affordable housing. And in order to make those decisions, it's hard decisions. Now, the gentleman just talked about, you remember a certain date. When President Kennedy got shot, I was in basic training. In fact, it was the day I was finishing. Now, that might have been a very important, day for him. But when it comes to affordable housing, sometimes some of the decisions you have to make, the hard decisions to make are really the right decisions. Wrong decisions are easy to make. So I would hope that you wouldn't consider moving into empty houses as a part of somehow instituting or substituting for affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Strawder, very much. Anyone else wish to address the board? Then I close this second public comment period. County Attorney?
No comments, Mr.
County
Chairman.
Administrator?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a very few, just a couple details on some things I mentioned earlier. We did complete the survey, the citizen survey timeframe of the 1,900 citizens we requested a survey from. We had a really excellent return rate, 676. Nearly a third of folks responded, and that's a great response rate. We also had 231 additional folks who chose to access the survey online who weren't sent the notice, so that's a great rate as well. So we'll have a draft July 20th to take a look at, and then the company will come and present the results to this board, looking at trying to get them here for the August or September regular board meeting, if that suits the board. We're try and schedule that.
The sooner the better, given that it was one of the inputs to the comprehensive plan work group charter.
Right. And so hopefully the August one will work. If we could push that forward to the August workshop, we could try that as well, if that's your preference. But we'll have to work with them and your schedule and see if we can get them lined up.
Thank you.
So I will check on the work session date as well. Just a reminder that the VACO annual conference, which is in November, they've sent out the request for information on who might wish to attend. You know, that's a long lead up. So if you have interest in attending, this is their annual premier event. Please let Bonnie know so she can proceed with registration. I did mention the CAD is live. I think I also already thanked everybody. It's on my list, but I really think that was a great job, and we look forward to learning more data from that. One detail I left out was for those of you who use scanners, we're now part of a regional nomenclature, so every county and the city, you know, have had to change their numbering system so that I guess if there's a multi-region mutual aid type event, they'll know who's from where. So we were originally slated to be 13, I believe, so you'd hear, you know, engine 1301 or truck 1301, that kind of thing. Chief Singer pushed back on that a bit, saying that was too many digits and we would have trouble with that. So we're 7 now, so I like that, lucky 7. So you'll hear that now. It's 700 series units or Powhatan units. So just a little trivia there for folks who listen to our emergency responders on the scanner. I've mentioned in a couple of my written updates, we're looking at some pay plan adjustments, some maintenance work there. I just want to sort of let y'all know I'm still working on that with Melissa Lowe. Essentially, the county spent some money on a consultant to develop our pay plan and check it in the marketplace. And so that data is sort of 2015 data. So if you don't kind of shift things relative to the market, then you're not maintaining the system. So we're doing that kind of look, and we're looking at about a 6% shift. What that would mean as a practical matter is for folks who sort of drop below the entry-level numbers, they might need to get some pay adjustments to kind of get on the beginning of the pay scale. We are not proposing that everybody move relative to each other on the scale. That would be what we call range penetration. We don't have the kind of funding necessary to do that, but we would propose to keep people who drop off to come up. And you'll have more details on that, but I just want to let you know, kind of get that in your mind, that we're working on that, and we'll have more information when we complete the year end. Then we'll know kind of where we are with collection of revenue, expenditures, and whether we have something to use as carryover to help with that. Similarly, on the CIP, we have not presented the CIP for adoption yet. We are kind of completing our year end, so we'll know how much we have that we could contribute to capital versus fund balance. There's no urgency there. We will get that to you. We have our big projects wrapping up, and no big projects that are kind of waiting to be funded yet until we adopt the CIP. So to that end, we sort of have 3 big issues. One is schools, the TRAIN study. They have a number of improvements that they think they can gain from energy efficiency projects. But this study has also caused them to identify a number of other maintenance items or capital improvement maintenance items that can be handled with their own maintenance forces using the capital maintenance reserve. So that's that whole idea of allowing them to roll over savings and use them in the future has shown some benefits. So that should reduce the amount of money that they're interested in financing for long-term improvements. any debt issued to do this energy savings program would be something that the county has to issue. So we've got our financial advisor kind of looking at that, looking at their reports, and we'll kind of try to piece all that together and come back with a recommendation that hopefully funds some of those efficiencies and takes care of some of the items on their CIP, but then also reduces the total amount because they'll be handling some of that with their own forces. Similarly, I'm hopeful that we can put a couple of big ticket items in there for the county generally. One of them is the convenience center. We've long talked about the need for an eastern convenience center to help cut down on the long lines and recognizing that we don't have really any expansion room in the current facility. Before we were to try to do that, I think having another facility in the east potentially could cut down on the volume of people at the existing facility, which then might allow it to function better without having to do significant improvements. So that's sort of the interplay between the two. And so we're going to need to look at that. And then we have this next phase of Fighting Creek that's sort of looming out there. You know, how are we going to be able to fund that? And our new Parks and Rec Advisory Commission is going to be doing some planning work around that, but without some capital dollars, it's unlikely we'd be able to move forward with such an ambitious project. So I'm going to be working with Charlotte, our financial advisor, to kind of see how all these things fit together with our CIP and come back to the board with some proposals on you know, how that might work in our next sort of quarter here. So that's just kind of a heads up. In response to some board members and actually some public emails about looking at Goochland's proffer system and all that sort of thing, I've had some extensive conversations with the Goochland County Administrator, actually stretching back to last fall, about what they were up to, and Tischler Bice, a firm that I'm familiar with from some years ago, working on these kinds of issues. I'm intrigued by what they've done. What the only sort of cautionary note is that Tischler Bice is only a part of the solution. They can build us the model that sort of costs the proffers for you, but the inputs is the real heavy lifting. And so in order to be successful, we'll need to have our CIP as comprehensively updated as possible with good numbers. Also, the school's plan for capital facilities will need to be similarly updated and longer term than it currently is. And then a transportation plan, because that's often where a significant generation of fees or proffers comes from, is building your transportation system. And we don't have a current transportation master plan. We have elements of it. We have the 60 plan, if you will, is the most recent thing that this board adopted. We would need to kind of go ahead and have a more comprehensive transportation master plan pulled together. So those would be the sort of three legs of the stool, if you will. The school plan, the county plan, and the transportation plan. We want to get that done to feed into the Tischler Bice work. And so I'd like us to have that conversation at a workshop, and potentially Tischler Bice can come and kind of outline all that for us and help make sure that we do that fundamental planning work in a way that will successfully feed forward to their tools and models. But aside, I just want to let y'all know I got the message. That's something we need to work on, but I also wanted to just make it clear that hiring them alone won't get us where we need to go. We're going to have to build those other foundational pieces to do this justice.
So let us have a comprehensive proposal from you with them attached to it, your presentation, which you just did. You outlined it, saying what it's going to cost and what it's going to take as far as the input. So it's one piece of them working together with you, but rather sooner than later.
And then finally, oh, I'm sorry, if there are questions on that.
Just a comment, Chair. I was going to bring this up under my supervisor comments. You're correct. The inputs are important. Right now, you see the chairman appointing a committee to bring the comprehensive plan to closure. That's the plan. And it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Now, the comprehensive plan is a 20-year plan for development. The Tischler-Bice model uses a 25-year CIP. Now, the questions I would be asking is, wouldn't you want to know, with your comprehensive plan, what type of infrastructure your CIP implements your comprehensive plan? Why wouldn't you want to have this information right now as we're going forward with the comprehensive plan and closure, I might add, because we're going to pass a comprehensive plan. You saw the seriousness of the board in committing to that tonight. What I'm saying is, I don't want to go in a linear fashion on this. We should be working today with the schools to find out what is their 20-year or long-year plan for schools in Powhatan County. And knowing the schools, they probably already have something in place. They do. Secondly, the county should be planning as well. If we only have pieces of it right now, why not go ahead and have the meeting with Tischler-Bice in anticipation of us coming to closure on the comprehensive plan, so we don't have to wait and initiate that process after we reach closure on the comprehensive plan. We're going to be wanting to be planning more than 5 years, as we've been doing with the CIP. We're going to be wanting to look out 20 years. So a 25-year CIP makes sense. We should be starting to work on that now and start looking forward thinking with staff. Now, we might not have all the inputs that they want when the time comes after we reach closure, but we can be feeding the inputs that we have. Maybe we've only got 10 years of this, or maybe only 5 years of that, but we can update with the inputs as we obtain that information. But we want to have the information because, again, we're planning for the development of this county looking 20 years out. So we should already be seeking this information and planning to have this information so that we would know what the build-out looks like, what's the cost, and that we can be able to share that information to the development community so that they can put forward a reasonable proffer to mitigate the cost of development that's coming into this county.
Got it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments while you're at, supervisor comments? Mr. Melton? I'm good. Mrs. Nordvig? And none from me?
Mr. Chairman, the last thing I was just going to mention is, given the 4th of July holiday, Planning Commission's meeting will be moved. That will prevent us from being able to meet the advertising requirements to move any planning items onto the July regularly scheduled time for the board. Having said that, we last year did take July off as a meeting. I don't have any items necessarily that will come forward that can't wait till August, and with the cancellation of the workshop, my question to the board is, do you want to take a summer hiatus from the July meeting?
What's the consensus of the board? No July meeting or not? I got one no. Bill? Larry?
So if we were to move the meeting, if the planning commission did take action on things in July, if we moved the meeting to a later week in July, would it meet the deadline? I think our meeting was, I don't have the calendar, I'm opening it up now.
That would move it to the 30th, and I'd have to ask staff if that meets their requirements.
So you're toward canceling?
Well, if it could be, if the planning commission sends anything and we can meet it on the 30th, why wouldn't we have the meeting on the 30th and not have things delayed? I mean, I'll go either way, whatever y'all want to do.
Bill, David, you all right with having on the 30th?
I'll do whatever y'all want.
Larry?
That's fine.
All right, let's schedule it for the 30th.
If we can meet the deadlines,
Right.
advertising, if we
Right.
can't, then it's canceled.
Mr. Latchney, would you take us into closed session, please?
Yes, sir. Whereas the Board of Supervisors of Powhatan County desires to discuss in closed meeting the following: discussion concerning the health of a specific public official and their ability to continue to serve in the position they occupy, consultation with legal counsel pertaining to actual or probable litigation where such consultation in open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the public body concerning the Batterson FOIA litigation, consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by the public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel concerning alleged misconduct at a county firehouse, potential legal remedies to require developer to complete a road, potential legal steps with respect to proposed Cumberland landfill, legal options with respect to an alleged zoning violation on Goodwin Road, and the potential grandfathering of a subdivision pursuant to the Old County subdivision ordinance. And whereas pursuant to sections 2.2, 3711A1, A7, and A8 of the Code of Virginia, such discussions may occur in closed meeting. Now therefore be resolved that the Board of Supervisors of Powhatan County is hereby authorized discussing the forestated matters in closed meeting. Need that as a motion.
So moved. Second. All those in favor say aye. 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 Thank you. We're in closed session. I hereby reconvene the regular meeting of the Powhatan County Board of Supervisors, an open meeting, and request the clerk of the board to conduct a roll call certification vote of the supervisors to be included in the minutes of this meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for the record, Mrs. Cabell was not at this meeting, and Mr. Nordvig left the closed session meeting before it concluded. We'll try to note that time in the minutes. Board members, do certify to the best of your knowledge that the only matters discussed in the closed meeting were public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting just conducted. Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Melton?
Aye.
Mr. Tucker?
Aye. There being no, nope, not quite yet. One comment. One of the items we discussed in closed session tonight was my diagnosis of Parkinson's disease. I will continue to serve on the board, health permitting. My peers have graciously supported my continuation as chair, health permitting. If my health deteriorates such that it degrades my ability to serve, I shall step down. I also tonight use this opportunity to announce that I shall not seek re-election even if my health holds. There being no further business for the board, this meeting is adjourned.